What is going on, guys? Commentary for you. I am joined by, honestly, the first EA developer, Madden developer, that ever approached me and allowed me to go to EA and have an interview with him. And at a time where the divide between my channel and EA was relatively large in the community, I would say there were two people that were instrumental in closing that gap. And unfortunately, one of them is no longer with EA, but he is with me tonight, and that is Rex Dixon. So, Rex, the first question people will obviously want to know is, what would be your biggest regret with your time at Madden and EA?
Wow, you just fire right out the gates with the good ones. Biggest regret, man. It'd be too easy to just go with a feature or kind of talk about like the general direction things went with accessibility and appealing to casuals. But honestly, my biggest regret internally is that I wasn't able to develop the right tactics, kind of political and interpersonal interactions when dealing with executives and producers to affect real change. I just all the tactics I used to try to convince them about investing in the core, about that people didn't want gimmick features and back of box stuff, all the same arguments that Ian gave on his way out. I was just not effective at swaying them to how I felt the direction of the game should go. That's my biggest regret.
Is there a time where you felt the writing was on the wall there? I mean, it's ironic that you mentioned Ian. Did at some point you feel like you were in a box that maybe other developers had been and you just weren't able to convey that message? Was there a time where you really felt you'd lost control of that and you had no other option but to leave?
Yeah, but it was kind of a long and drawn out process. I think um, during development of Madden 17 is when I started to feel like I no longer had the creative autonomy to push the game in the direction I wanted it to go. And then when Frostbite came around and Long Shot 2, it was just one thing after another that I was like, this doesn't make any sense. We're investing in the wrong things. And the more and more I felt that way, the more I knew it was time for me to go.
Would you say that was an uphill battle? I mean, did you really have to spend a lot of time trying to convince? You don't have to name anyone specifically, but how much time did you have to devote to them to explain, this is what feedback we're getting from the community. This is the direction you are going in. And here's all the ways those things don't align. Because I feel like even now, that disconnect is still very there.
Oh yeah, well that's the whole thing. It's like you can only say something so many times until you realize like you're talking to a brick wall, and no matter how many really solid, effective arguments you make, uh, that train is on the track it's on, and nothing one individual can do, in my experience, is going to change that. And it's a shame, but I mean, how many times are you going to try to fight the same battle and lose? And almost to your own detriment, where all of a sudden you become the squeaky wheel and you become the guy who's not like on board with the team, and all those things that I guess put you in this toxic bucket because now you're no longer a team player because you disagree with the direction things are headed in. And I definitely fell in that trap.
So, I mean, would it be fair to say at times you thought, in trying to make the game you wanted and trying to execute your vision, that you were fighting people within your own team?
I wouldn't say fighting. It just you get stuck. It's like when you have a disagreement with your spouse that you can't resolve, and you get to a point where you're just like, okay, well, we have to agree to disagree. It's like disagree but commit, and then you do that, but it eats away at you day after day after day because in your heart you're doing the wrong thing, even though you have to commit to be a functional member of the team. So I wouldn't say I was fighting with anybody, but I definitely let people know how I felt, and I think that ended up becoming one of the reasons why we had to part ways.
Can you give me an example of maybe one of those conversations where you lobbied and then maybe the reasons you gave to lobby for something to be improved that ultimately wasn't?
Yeah, uh, th- there's like probably a million examples, but it's kind of like when they took a bunch of gameplay resources to work on Frostbite, and other gameplay resources were working on Longshot. I was giving kind of a complaint that the gameplay team, the core gameplay team, had been reduced by in numbers to a degree that I thought we were going to be in trouble. Like I need this many people to land this plane, and based on the amount that you've given me versus what I had 2 years ago, I don't know that we're going to have a good result. But there were top-down commitments that were already made. The number of dev resources they needed to port the Frostbite engine was massive, and every team took hits, not just gameplay. But it was like one of those things where it's like, once they had set those wheels in motion, no argument that you could come up with was going to change it. It was just kind of like you had to make do with what you had. So that's an example of something where I was pushing back really hard about the reduction in staff and core gameplay, and just wasn't able to get it resolved.